It's a really strange thing about the human brain.
Oh, how so?
Well, the exact same physiological response. The racing heart, the tight chest, the absolute certainty that everything is falling apart that gets triggered whether you are standing on the edge of a cliff facing a literal historical famine or whether you're just lying in bed at 2 in the morning.
Right, just staring at the ceiling, stressing out about some awkward conversation you had with the landscaper.
Exactly. Adrenaline doesn't distinguish between an epic catastrophe and a domestic inconvenience. To
Yeah.
your nervous system, an overwhelming threat is just an overwhelming threat.
Yeah, our neurobiology is essentially trapped in this state of high alert, regardless of the scale of the crisis.
I mean, it really is.
The architecture of human despair,
Mm.
that whole feeling of being entirely out of options, it operates on the exact same circuitry, whether the stakes are national survival or simply finding the momentum to get out of bed in the morning.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the mission for this deep dive is to explore the mechanics of that despair, and more importantly, how we cognitively break out of it.
Right, that's the key.
And we are diving into a highly unusual stack of sources today. We're bridging a massive historical and thematic gap.
We really are. It's quite a leap.
On one hand, we have this detailed breakdown and study notes of the ancient biblical narrative of Genesis chapter 42. So a story of famine, betrayal, and familial trauma.
Wow, heavy stuff.
Yeah, and interwoven with that, we have these incredibly vulnerable modern journal entries from an individual navigating the exhausting, mundane anxieties of daily life.
Which is such a brilliant juxtaposition.
It is. We are taking an ancient patriarch's overwhelming grief and crossing it with a modern person's struggle, just like sweep the floor.
Well, it's brilliant because it completely removes the distraction of scale. By placing a sprawling, multi-generational epic next to a Wednesday morning to-do list, we can isolate the actual mechanisms of fear, guilt, and resilience.
Yeah, we get to see how the human mind actually interprets reality under pressure.
Precisely.
So let's look at that pressure, starting with the Genesis source. Since you, our listener, are likely familiar with the broad strokes here, we don't need to rehash the entire Sunday school plot.
Right, we can skip the basics.
We know the setup. A massive famine has struck Canaan. Jacob sends 10 of his sons down to Egypt to buy corn, but he intentionally keeps his youngest, Benjamin, behind.
Because he fundamentally does not trust these older brothers.
Exactly. The text notes he fears mischief might befall him. And we all know the great dramatic irony here.
Oh yeah, the powerful Egyptian governor they end up bowing to is Joseph, the very brother they betrayed and sold into slavery decades ago.
Right. So we are dropping right into a powder keg of unresolved trauma.
Yeah, the brothers do not recognize Joseph, but the power dynamic is absolute. They're starving, and he controls the food supply.
And I want to look at the psychological game Joseph plays here because it always strikes me as incredibly intense.
Oh, it's fascinating.
He doesn't just hand over the grain, right? And he doesn't immediately execute them either. He accuses them of being spies who have come to see the nakedness of the land.
He speaks very roughly to them.
Yeah, and he ultimately throws them all into an Egyptian prison for 3 days. I mean, I have to challenge the conventional reading here.
Go for it.
To a modern ear, this sounds less like a noble test and more like an abuse of power. Like, think about it. It's like running into someone you severely bullied in high school, only to realize they're now the CEO of the company you are begging for a job from.
That is a terrifying scenario.
Right. So is Joseph just inflicting the trauma he experienced back onto them? Is he just being vindictive?
Well, what's fascinating here is that if we look at this through a psychological lens rather than just a moral one, Joseph is initiating a radical disruption of their equilibrium.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
He isn't just punishing them. He's applying a very specific type of pressure to force their deepest, unaddressed psychology to the surface. He is basically creating a diagnostic test. For 20 years, these brothers have maintained a collective conspiracy of silence about what they did. Joseph's harshness shatters that cognitive dissonance.
It definitely shatters it, because the immediate reaction the brothers have in that prison isn't to complain about the unfairness of the Egyptian justice system.
No, not at all.
They don't strategize a legal defense or talk about appealing to a higher authority.
They immediately internalize the crisis. The source text highlights their exact realization. They say, "We are verily guilty concerning our brother, therefore is this distress come upon us."
Reuben even jumps in with a massive "I told you so."
He really does.
He points out that he warned them not to sin against the child, and because they didn't listen, his blood is required. They instantly connect a random accusation of espionage in Egypt to a decades-old crime in Canaan.
And this perfectly illustrates how unresolved guilt colors our perception of reality.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
The human brain is a pattern recognition machine, you know. When we carry deep shame or unresolved guilt, we subconsciously expect the universe to balance the scales.
We basically expect punishment.
Exactly. So, when a random crisis occurs, like a harsh governor accusing them of being spies, their guilt hijacks the data. Every piece of bad luck is interpreted as a targeting strike of cosmic justice.
Wow.
They are suffering from an extreme form of confirmation bias, and it's totally fueled by their own internal shame.
And that mechanism explains the most mind-bending twist in this entire chapter.
Oh, the money in the sacks.
Yes. Joseph eventually lets them go, keeping Simeon as collateral, and tells them they have to bring Benjamin back to prove their story. But secretly, he commands his servants to fill their sacks with corn and put every man's money back into his sack.
He is giving them the food for free.
Right. It is an objective, undeniable benefit, a literal gift of survival in the middle of a deadly famine.
But their reaction defies all logic.
Totally. They stop at an inn, one of them opens his sack to feed his donkey, and he sees the money. Logically, they should be thrilled. They just got a massive financial windfall.
But instead, the text says their heart failed them, and they were afraid.
Yeah, they look at each other in absolute terror and ask, "What is this that God hath done unto us?"
Because of their guilt, they lack the psychological bandwidth to interpret a gift as a gift. They see grace, and they assume it is a trap.
It's like an incredibly anxious employee being called into the boss's office for a surprise.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Even if the boss is handing them a massive bonus check and a promotion, that employee's internal anxiety makes them assume they are being fired the moment they walk through the door.
The anxiety dictates the narrative, regardless of the facts on the desk.
Exactly. The brothers assume the governor planted the money to frame them for theft. Their internal state turns an act of immense generosity into a source of sheer panic.
Which brings us to the compounding nature of this despair. When they return to Canaan and empty their sacks in front of Jacob, the fear just radiates outward.
Yeah, they explain the whole situation, the rough governor, Simeon being held hostage, the demand for Benjamin, and then every single one of them finds their money in their sacks.
The collective panic just hits a boiling point.
And Jacob's reaction is the absolute peak of patriarchal despair. He completely shuts down.
Completely.
He refuses to let Benjamin go. He cries out, "Me have you bereaved of my children. Joseph is not, and Simeon is not, and you will take Benjamin away. All these things are against me."
So bleak.
He tells them flat out that if mischief befalls Benjamin, they will bring his gray hairs with sorrow to the grave.
The study notes in our sources really emphasize the thematic weight of this moment. This ordeal forces old, calcified wounds wide open.
It really does.
Jacob is experiencing profound learned helplessness. He's looking at a situation where he has to risk the one thing he loves most just to survive. He's paralyzed by the fear of losing what little he has left, completely convinced that the universe is actively working against him.
All these things are against me. That specific phrase feels so universal,
Absolutely.
Because that neurological freeze response, that terror of making a wrong move and losing everything that isn't just an ancient survival mechanism, we see that exact same paralysis in the modern journal entries we are looking at today.
Yeah, the transition in our sources from the sweeping epic to the intensely personal microdrama is really striking. The scale shrinks, but the emotional intensity remains completely identical.
We have these highly vulnerable, deeply specific journal entries from a writer who is just trying to navigate a typical week. The writer documents waking up at 2 in the morning on a Wednesday, entirely consumed by worries.
And they aren't stressing about a global famine or an Egyptian governor.
No, they are stressing about home insurance premiums. They're stressing about costs. They're stressing about a landscaping situation. They list sundry needs for house, home, mind, and body.
It's that slow creeping dread of daily existence when your resources, whether financial, emotional, or physical, just feel completely depleted. It's a modern famine of bandwidth.
Yes. You can feel the tangible paralysis in the way the writer describes their state of mind. They talk about experiencing mental drain and foggy inspiration.
They document a profound lack of momentum.
But the detail that really anchored this for me was when the writer mentioned, "I wash dishes rotely now."
That is a highly clinical observation of their own behavior.
Let's analyze that, because washing dishes rotely isn't just a sad, poetic detail. When you're standing at the sink, staring blankly out the window, scrubbing a plate on absolute autopilot, without being present in your own body.
You're in a dissociative state.
Exactly. Your brain is so overloaded by the unpaid bills, the home repairs, the sheer volume of the famine, that it starts shutting down higher level executive functions just to conserve energy.
It's an evolutionary defense mechanism. When the threat level remains constantly elevated, but there's no physical tiger to run away from, only abstract threats like home insurance, the nervous system eventually resorts to shutting down.
It's burnout.
Yeah, it's a burnout. It's the exact same paralysis Jacob felt in Canaan, staring at the dwindling grain, completely afraid to act.
Sweeping the floor feels as monumentally impossible to this modern writer as going back to face the governor of Egypt felt to the brothers. The sheer weight of existence has pinned them down.
This raises an important question for you, the listener. When we find ourselves in that state, when the internal panic of a Tuesday morning perfectly mirrors the dread of an ancient patriarch, how do we disrupt the cycle?
Yeah, how do we break out of the cognitive paralysis?
Right.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting, because the journal writer documents a massive, sudden breakthrough.
Oh, this part is great.
And the pivot point in the text is just 2 words, written in all caps, with 2 exclamation points. Godo.
It serves as a literal pattern interrupt.
Huh.
In cognitive behavioral terms, they are actively forcing a break in the neural loop of their own anxiety.
The shift from total paralysis to a sudden burst of momentum is incredible. The writer documents this extensive, highly specific list of physical accomplishments.
So they really get moving.
They write, I packed all Sal Army in boxes, took things aside to keep. They talk about sweeping an upstairs room where the insulation is actively falling down.
Think about the physical environment mirroring the internal state there. Falling insulation is messy, it's itchy, it implies structural decay.
Right.
It's a vivid image of a house and perhaps a life that feels like it's slowly falling apart.
And yet they tackle it. They don't just sweep the upstairs, they sweep the kitchen and the living room. They damp mop a spot in the front hallway. They sweep off the welcome mat.
Just knocking things off the list left and right.
Yeah. They physically take the old boxes and junk out to the garbage can. The writer explicitly notes, these things felt close to impossible before.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is crucial to understand why these seemingly mundane chores are being documented with such triumph.
Because it's not just a to-do list.
Exactly. To a mind that has been paralyzed by dissociative anxiety, sweeping a welcome mat is a monumental victory over despair. It's the reclamation of agency.
And the momentum isn't just physical either. It expands into deeply personal and communal connections.
They reach out.
They do. The writer talks about taking a bath before a church service and smelling delectable, feeling human and present again. They go to the service and actively give gifts to the saints. They list incredibly tangible, specific interactions that act as lifelines.
They're essentially documenting the specific counter-evidence to their anxiety.
Yes. Reconnecting with a childhood friend, Darva Watkins. Experiencing the strengthening confidence that Sis K and Mom Sis Shah have in their life.
And there's a very specific, practical financial resolution mentioned as well.
That's right. The writer expresses deep gratitude for a $200 gift from a Sis Brenda, which helped resolve a landscaping misunderstanding by Brader Joe Gordon.
Notice how granular the focus becomes. When the brain is overwhelmed, it generalizes the threat, all these things are against me.
Everything is terrible.
Right. But when the brain begins to heal and find resilience, it focuses on the highly specific, tangible graces. The $200 check, the conversation with Darva Watkins, the clean spot on the hallway floor.
And we can see exactly how the writer engineered this cognitive shift. The sources include the specific verses of the day the writer was using.
Which is such a helpful detail.
Looking at these verses not just as theology, but as ancient cognitive behavioral tools, we see how the writer literally reprograms their anxiety.
The specific scriptures cited are vital. Psalms 91, He that dwelleth in the secret place the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty.
That's a powerful one.
And Psalms 27, The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear? And critically, Isaiah 44, verse 3, For I will pour water upon him that is thirsty, and floods upon the dry ground.
The writer is using these texts to systematically dismantle the narrative of the famine. When they were washing dishes rotely, completely burnt out, they were the dry ground.
Exactly.
And that sudden, inexplicable motivation to sweep up the falling insulation, to damp mop the hallway, that was the flood of water they were promised.
They are choosing to interpret their sudden burst of energy not as a random fluctuation of brain chemistry, but as a direct intervention.
The external facts on the ground did not miraculously vanish. The insulation is still a problem. The home insurance premiums still exist.
The macro-level stressors remain, just as the famine in Canaan remained.
Right. The shift was entirely internal. The cognitive reframing allowed the writer to act despite the overarching threat.
Which brings us to the grand synthesis of these two seemingly disparate sources.
Yes, let's tie it all together.
The writer zeroes in on a profound realization toward the end of the journal entries. They confess, "I've spent time in grief about what I do or have not done,"
They were punishing themselves for the paralysis.
carrying this heavy guilt about their lack of productivity. But then they realize the true metric isn't the physical to-do list. They quote the proverb, "Out of the heart are the issues of life." And note, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he."
This is where the Genesis study notes and the modern journal perfectly align. Now, I want to be clear to you listening, we're looking at this impartially. We aren't preaching here, but just observing the deeply human mechanism of faith in these texts.
Right, as a psychological framework.
The study notes in our stack outline a massive thematic arc across the book of Genesis, one that culminates in chapter 50, verse 20.
When Joseph finally reveals his true identity to his brothers.
Yeah, and they are terrified. They assume he's finally going to execute his revenge, but Joseph tells them, "Ye thought it for evil, but God meant it for good."
It is the ultimate reframe. It takes a sprawling history of trauma, kidnapping, betrayal, and starvation, and retroactively reframes the entire narrative through the lens of ultimate purpose and grace.
And that mechanism of reframing perfectly mirrors the modern journal writer's final conclusion.
It really does.
After all the grinding anxiety about the landscaping misunderstanding with Brooch or Joe Gordon, after the paralysis over the falling insulation, the writer concludes, "I am what I am, and God has made it good."
The parallel is stunning. Whether we're analyzing Joseph's brothers standing in a dusty inn, absolutely terrified by the life-saving money they just found in their corn sacks,
Or we're analyzing a modern individual waking up in a cold sweat about home insurance.
the fundamental human challenge is identical.
The core challenge is the interpretation of the unexpected. The facts are just data points. The corn is in the sack. The insulation is on the floor.
The interpretation is what dictates our reality.
Do we see the unexpected as a trap, or do we see it as a gift? The brothers' hearts failed them because their internal guilt demanded that the money be a trap.
While the journal writer initially viewed their lack of momentum as a permanent, catastrophic failure of character,
Until they deliberately chose to interpret a sudden burst of energy as a divine gift of water on dry ground.
they changed the story they were telling themselves about their own struggle.
So what does this all mean for you? When you step back and look at this strange, beautiful intersection of ancient history and modern vulnerability, the takeaway is actually incredibly empowering.
It really is.
Whether you are dealing with multi-generational family trauma and dwindling resources, or you're just trying to find the sheer willpower to deal with messy falling insulation in your upstairs room, the narrative you construct around your circumstances dictates your neurobiology.
This leaves us with one final thought from these sources, a new angle to consider as you process all of this.
Let's hear it.
If grace so often looks like a trap to a guilty, anxious conscience, just as the life-saving money terrified the brothers in Genesis, how many catastrophes in our modern lives are actually blessings we just don't have the emotional bandwidth to recognize yet?
Oh, wow. That is a phenomenal question to chew on. How many administrative errors, unexpected delays, or seemingly disastrous interruptions in your own life this week are actually gifts that your anxiety is tricking you into fearing?
Are you staring at a bag full of return money and feeling your heart fail when you should be celebrating the fact that you have the corn you need to survive?
We all have a little bit of that ancient Canaanite panic hardwired into us, and we all have a little bit of that 2 a.m. modern dread.
We do.
The trick is recognizing the dry ground for what it is, finding your pattern interrupt, and figuring out how to sweep the welcome mat anyway.
Well said.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. It has been an absolute blast unpacking the psychology of these sources with you. Keep questioning the narratives you tell yourself, and we will catch you on the next one.